Thanks everyone for tuning in to check out our podcast, Maker Connect. My name is Matt Despins, and I'll be your host for the show. With me today, we have Will Aitken, who, unless you're brand new to the world of LinkedIn, you probably have seen some of his hilarious content out there in the social media ethos. So, Will, if you're open to it, I'd love to start by asking you just to tell us a little bit about your career, your background, so the listeners can get a flavor of your negotiation and sales experience, which is part of your specialty, but
Sure.
also your inspiration. So, Will, we're truly excited to have you here with us. And with that, I'll turn it over to you to brag about yourself for a minute. And it's the host who's making a request that you brag. So your humility remains fully intact, sir. Go ahead.
I'm too humble for that, Matt. Come on. I'm just kidding. I'm the best thing since sliced bread. I'm the best salesperson in the world. Give me a deal, I'll close it. No.
That's what we think.
I can't come on too heavy, but no, in reality, I've been in sales now for probably 8 years or so, and the most recent 2 of which I've spent a lot of my focus has been creating content to try and help sellers do their jobs better in different aspects. That includes like prospecting, cold email, cold calls, LinkedIn, even a little bit of content creation, that old social selling, personal brand side of things. But mainly the basics of those, but then going on further into the deal cycle with discovery, demo, and of course, topic of today, negotiation tips to help them essentially do a better job, close more deals, bigger ones, and smash those quotas. So yeah, that's me. I create content for sellers. Writing a book right now, actually. And you'll be disappointed to hear that the negotiation chapter is probably the shortest one because I have some pretty clean cut thoughts on how it should be done. So I really hope we don't disagree too much today.
No, I would that won't be the case. And the beautiful thing about negotiations, first off, is I'm far from a negotiation expert. Okay. I'm the one out there selling it. My team are the experts, but it's very individualized. All negotiations are different. There's lots of different paths to get there. So no doubt, I mean, you've done so many of them. I can't wait to hear your perspectives on it. So first off, before we get started, because you mentioned it, you're writing a book. I want to hear about it.
Yeah. Well, now the pressure's on. If I talk about it, then it has to happen at the same time. Look, it's about 30,000 words. It's still in manuscript stage. You need to get an editor over it. And I believe I might go down the route of co-authoring it with someone because I have the humility to admit that some aspects of sales, I have slight knowledge gaps. I just found myself, I was like, there's more to this, but I don't know how to put it into words. So I'm going to probably bring in a second person to help me see this thing through to the finish line. But it's called, how much am I going to give? It's called Close the Bleeping Sale. And it's going to be an end-to-end guide of how B2B sellers can do exactly that, close the bleeping sale.
Well, part of what you do, Will, like you described, is you're really, folks can think about you as kind of a 360-degree seller, right? So everything from the content-led selling to the actual prospecting and cold calling and follow-up. I mean, that's really in your wheelhouse. You had the humility to admit you had a couple gaps in there. I think nobody has it all, right? So am I correct to say that, but people can think about you as kind of an all-encompassing resource. Is that right?
That's how I look at myself. Yeah. I've never been an SDR or any really junior sales rep position. I've always been the sourcer and closer of my own deals, even back in my recruitment days. So yeah, 360 would be a good way to put it.
Okay, cool. So listen, I guess to kick us off here, when we're talking about the book and all that, looking at your LinkedIn profile, I mean, it looks like you're affiliated with a few different folks and have been. What parts of your experience, do you want to call out as important and relevant right now? Like, what are you passionate about? What do you got going on?
Yeah, I would say probably the best experience I had was when I was selling to SMB, so small businesses.
Yep.
And the reason being is because the number of reps that you get in that field is a lot higher than you get when you're selling to mid-market enterprise companies. So I feel like it's a really good place for sellers to start to hone in their skills. Now, a lot of those don't directly apply across, but most of them do, realistically. It's just longer deal cycles, more people, more things to manage. You almost have to get better at project management. But by doing that, that allowed me to get a lot of shots at bat.
Yep.
And refine, figure out what I did badly, what I did more of. and then get better at it, right? Because I find negotiation, especially when we talk about closing deals and actually doing the hard, all right, what's it going to take to get this thing done once they've already decided that they might be moving forward? It's one of the things that sellers don't get as much practice at just due to the nature of sales, that less people get to that stage in your process as, let's say, intro calls or even cold calls at the very top end of the funnel. So I think SMB was a really good place to get a lot of practice doing those types of negotiations, because I was, on average, my quota required me, based on my average deal size and my quota, I had to close 6 deals a month. So that gave
Wow.
me a lot of opportunity to do it badly and do it right. Not every, I'm negotiating with, and I'm 6. That's going to give you the exact number. That's probably actually a bit mean on myself. Most people did that stage, but that's the way I managed the sales process.
Will, in talking about that 360-degree view that you take and all the things that you've done with the SMBs, you were in a lot of negotiations and you had seen a lot. I want to talk a minute about, because you have so much personality in what you do with your content, I want to talk a minute about an emotion. I want to talk about fear in negotiations. You know, people sometimes go into it and they're feeling scared of awkwardness, the fear of rejection, fear of angering their boss. What have you felt or seen in your coworkers with that, and kind of how do you overcome that?
Let me think about this for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's kind of like what I was talking about before. You just get less experience negotiating, so it becomes really difficult to become confident at something that you're not doing that often. Because I find every skill in life gets better with repetitions and frequency as well, how often you're doing it. So you could have 1,000 negotiations, but they're 10 years ago, then you're probably not going to be as good as you are today. And you're probably going to be quite nervous going into that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've felt those nerves, knowing when I am probably going to get asked for a discount. I think that the important thing to do is, if you can't get the repetitions in there and do it frequently enough that you feel competent at it, then role playing is a really good way to get that out of the way.
Yep.
But also knowing a plan. A lot of negotiation can feel scary because it's unimprovised. You don't know what's coming. However, when you have a process in place for what happens when someone does want to negotiate with you, you can feel a lot more secure knowing, because you know, if this happens, I do this, and if this happens, I do that. It's almost like having like one of those, like those books that you read the page and says, "Go to page 76 if this happens." You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Bandersnatch was the original one of those. It's like one of those trees. So, you ready to move forward? Yes, great. When would you like to do, right? No, okay, what's getting in the way? Okay, prices. Okay, tell me more about that. So you have this kind of like almost not script, but flow. And having that, knowing what you're going to do if certain thing happens, can make you feel really confident. Then, of course, not just having that, but practicing it, both for your manager and in the real negotiating world. Because I sure have had my pants pulled down by a lot of buyers before I knew any better. So.
Yeah, I think I think anybody who anybody who says that hasn't happened to them is 100% not being honest, right? That's like, correct. I think that's everybody. Yeah. So I love what you're saying there, is like basically setting up those guardrails, you know, going into it with a plan that, okay, if they do X, I'm going to do Y, et cetera, et cetera. I think that you're right, Will. I think that goes a long way to increasing somebody's confidence.
I think for both people as well. Like,
yeah,
if the client can feel like you've done this before and you've got that confidence and that flow, then tell you what, when growing up, my mother, she and my stepfather, they breed dogs. So there was always like 12 dogs in our house at any one point in time.
I love
it's
dogs.
Crazy because we were really good at training them. All right, because we wanted to sell people trained puppies. We'll make sure that like they weren't getting like the most out of their thing, but we also want to make sure our dogs showed up well as well. So when people came and looked at the dogs, or pre-purchased one, whatever, it's not a puppy farm. They were really good dogs, and we weren't overbreeding or anything like that. But we wanted to breed dogs that were obviously well trained, because that often shows good pedigree and what you can expect from the puppy.
Mm-hmm.
So we had these really well trained dogs. We had like collies, cocker spaniels, a lot of hunting breeds, and when you walked them, or went and did something with them, like beating the bush, trying to scare pheasants out so someone else could this is taking a dark turn. The point is, when you were training them, they'd be hawked in on you because they know you're the boss, right?
Yep.
Whenever I brought one of my friends over my house, or my parents had friends over, and they tried to take the dogs out, the dogs would run all over them. And it's because they knew that the person who was in charge at that point in time wasn't really in charge. And a lot of that comes from the way you hold yourself, the way that you act, the confidence, the experience. The dogs could tell, and I think people have that sense as well. So oftentimes, if you come in feeling scared, worried, nervous, then that's often when you really do get beaten down in negotiations. I'm not saying you should fake it till you make it, but you should practice and feel confident in your process, because that's the best you can do to show up to that environment in the best way. Because generally, I think most buyers can tell if they're an experienced buyer, if they're dealing with a salesperson who they can, as we just said, pull the pants down off.
Yep.
They know. They've bought enough stuff. If, let's say, they've been through 10 deal cycles this year, they know when they're talking to a green sales rep who's not going to be that great at negotiation, and they can potentially, not to say that that's the buyers have mean intent, but it's money.
Yeah, I mean their intention is to maximize their profit and retain revenue, right? And so you need to look at areas of opportunity to do that. And one of them, if it is the inexperience or insecurity of the person you're working with, then that might be a logical next step.
Yeah. A lot of people talk about the concept of commission breath. If you know someone needs something and they don't know that you need their thing, then you automatically have the upper hand in that, and that in any, give-get scenario.
Yeah. And, even besides what I've noticed in life, even besides the logical part of it, is that there is some other kind of energy out there. When you're having a good day and you're confident, the people that you're communicating with, things just seem to go better, right? Whatever you're doing. But if you are just having a bad day, even if you act like you think you're acting normal, the universe can sense it, man. Do you find that too? That it's just like
yes.
There's an X factor out there.
Yeah, and it can be on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, especially in sales, because things aren't going well. Then I'm pretty sure a lot of your life will be being affected by that, and it's really hard to hide that essentially, or pretend it's not there. So you definitely bring that energy with you. I've always thought the best way to get around that is just self-belief in a way, like I've always found that I have a better time when I'm having a better time. You know what I mean? So like gamifying what you can, smiling, enjoying no matter what, knowing that no matter what happens here today in this job or the next, you're going to probably be okay. And then just go with the flow, if you know what I mean? I don't know. That sounds bad, but like when in sales and you're crushing it, it's really easy to keep crushing it. It's why often when I'm talking to people about prospecting, they like let their foot off the gas when they're doing enough to get by. Like, no, now's your time to double down. This is your high to ride, because there's going to be a low eventually. Ooh. And the way you get that high to last as long as you found is just keep building momentum. A lot of people get to that point like, oh, I've got to book one cold call, one meeting a day. Let's say if you're an SDR. And they book the meeting and then they go, all right, that's my job done for today. Well, no, that's actually a really good opportunity, because you're feeling good, you're feeling confident, you're feeling capable. Then go do another one and potentially even a third one, So I'm always saying double down on your successes. And even when you're in a low, know that there is going to probably be another high. And knowing that's coming is often all you need to get out of that low.
Well, I agree with you completely, because when you look at, sometimes if you have a low, which we all do, in like myself, I ask, I say, well, wait a minute. Every other low that I've ever had, it all turned out okay, right? Like it all turned out okay. And so really when you have something bad happens, you try to get to that mindset of like, okay, right? It's all going to work out. Like I'm just going to keep on going, because really, as the old saying goes, I've suffered a great many tragedies in my life, most of which have never happened. So, I mean, things often seem a lot worse than they really are. So that's great advice. Will, you actually made a video about that one time, I think a couple of months ago. Correct me if I'm wrong. You made some kind of a video that was hilarious about I think you called it closer juice, where the guy essentially made one sale and then had his coffee. Or is any of this ringing a bell?
Yeah, the day in the life of a sales rep.
Yeah.
The DocuSign came through, and then he takes the rest of the day off and goes and plays golf.
Right.
Yeah, because I was, doubling down on the trope, right? But yeah, that's something I think a lot of people fall into the trap of.
Yeah.
Heck, you don't know what tomorrow can bring, but you're feeling good today, so use it.
Yeah, I love it. And so, for our listeners, definitely as well, when you check out some of Will's stuff, I mean, you all see me laughing because the stuff he puts out does make me laugh. It is truly good. Will, because you are a guy with a lot of personality, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this. Out there in the world of negotiations, people can sometimes talk about it as a lot of it being science, math, probability, statistics. Other side of the camp can talk about it being much more of an art form. Where do you feel like you fall on that? Like, do you think it's an exact mix of both, or do you tend to believe that it's more one versus the other?
I think it's a bit of a mix of both. I mentioned earlier, one of the best things you can do to prepare yourself for negotiation is have a process, right? So if this happens, that can happen. I do this. This can happen. I can do this. Then again, you and I, let's say, Matt, we sounds the same prospect. You and I could do the exact same things and follow that exact same map and tree, following the exact same answer. If they say this, I'm going to say this, and get different results. And I think that is because everyone sells slightly differently. Everyone's a different person. Everyone has different levels of conviction, and the way they say things is different, right? I believe sales in general is quite an art form. And one of the concepts I like to talk about with this is, like, I post a lot of sales advice on LinkedIn. I'm going to put this book out. People are going to disagree with it. But ultimately, I believe that there is more than one single way to be good at sales. And I think that's where the art form comes in, because your emotions, your personality, how you speak, two people could do the exact same thing and get wildly different results in sales. So I think that's probably where the emotional art form side comes in it. But you definitely should have a process. And if anything, build a process for yourself, because that's going to be the most predictable thing for you, which will then allow you to then refine that, learn from your mistakes, tweak it, make it better. Because you're the biggest variable in all of these sales activities, I find.
Yeah, that's a great point. With the way you talked about two people saying the exact same words, having different results. So true in sales and negotiations, right? Very different feelings can be created by the way that we say our words, or how we start the relationship from the beginning, right? From the very first phone call, which it's so funny how the same principles that apply to a great negotiation relationship are the same for sales. I can see you have some thoughts about that, so go ahead.
Well, no, I just think, when you invite me on here and we said we're going to talk about negotiations, I just think a lot of that happens up front, like way before it even gets the time to count dollars and roll up your sleeves and start negotiating like an FBI hostage negotiator. Like a lot of it happens before that, and I think a lot of the end is decided at the very beginning. I know for a fact that if I've got amazing levels of trust and rapport and value built in the deal cycle, the negotiation is going to go a heck of a lot better. If it happens at all, right? Sometimes you can do such a good job of selling that the person's like, all right, let's get this done. And they might have to go through a few formalities of getting other quotes and stuff like that. But you've built it. They're just like, they understand that, okay, I'm just better off. I've got this problem. You can solve it. Let's get this thing done. All right. And then there's other cases where you don't do everything right because you can't every time. And that's when sometimes you end up in these negotiation situations that can be a little bit more icky, scary,
Tense.
If it doesn't go well, then maybe you are a little bit, in trouble. We can talk about more examples of those if you like.
I would love to hear some more examples.
Yeah, so I think to me, the worst type of negotiation to be in ever is when you're selling and someone is saying, hey, I've got two options and I think they're the same. Who can give me the best price? That happens a lot in sales. Just, people these days, risk averse, they're looking at several different options. if you haven't built the differentiator and value, that can go the wrong way. You could actually lose the sale if you're not able to meet their number if you do the things that way. And though in those cases, oftentimes there's no real winner because both vendors, both salespeople working with both companies that they're evaluating, it's like a race to the bottom.
Yep.
So that's one of the
race
more
to the
tense,
bottom.
Yeah, it's one of those more.
I've never heard that before. I love it.
You haven't heard that one?
No.
But I just think when you get in those situations, it can become more of there's no winner in those, right?
Yeah.
And the best way to avoid them is doing the work up front during discovery, during demo, during a presentation, during deal cycle management to avoid that happening. And knowing that that's potential, but if it does come up, knowing what to do then as well, because I have a process for that as well, right? Oftentimes there is a difference. The buyer knows it, but they do want to still get a deal. And you just got to figure out if you're the one they want or they don't want, because they definitely want one of them more. It's not just about price. It never is. Very rarely. So asking some questions could be a really good way to dig yourself out of that hole.
Yeah, and I think one of the topics that you're touching on that we talk a lot about on this podcast is that the relationship and the respect and the transparency, right? Some of these things that you're talking about, the preparation for it is like, yeah, to your point, Will, is that a lot of times, sometimes there's far less of a negotiation if you've done the work up front to build that trust, right? Where the person
you wouldn't have that conversation with a friend, would you? You wouldn't be like, hey, just so you know, I'm only going to be friends with one of you. What can you do for me? Like it just wouldn't happen if you got to that level of the relationship. It might still, but less likely to.
That's actually a really good way to say that, and earlier today on the podcast, we had Sam McKenna on, and Sam would use a lot of analogies like that. Like, you wouldn't walk up to somebody that you just met and start talking with them instantly about everything, right? You would warm up to it. Yeah. And so she was trying to make the connection between the way that we approach sales and negotiations. Think about, would you say that to somebody in real life in that circumstance? Like when you send an email, would you send it, the way you write an email, you wouldn't say something like, are you against a call? And so it was really interesting to hear you say that, because Sam was saying the same thing.
Sam and I align on a lot of things. I think she's great, especially the human integrity side of sales. So,
yeah, so one question that I always like to ask is, a lot of people, a lot of listeners have the idea that negotiations are what they see in the movies. It's fist pounding on the table. It's a lot of like
money.
Yeah. It's like a lot of manipulations, right? And all like conniving and angling. What are some of your thoughts on what maybe the biggest differences are between, call it a movie negotiation, and then one that's happening in real life?
Yeah. I actually did a video on sales in movies versus in real life.
I want to see it.
Okay, yeah, it's on YouTube, but it's one of the better ones actually. I like to like scenes from like Glengarry Glen Ross.
Yep.
Boiler Room, Wolf of Wall Street. But I think to bring back most sales negotiations aren't like the same stakes as a lot of the movie negotiations you see, where it's like make it or break it. And there's a lot of tactics I think a lot of salespeople do still actually use that aren't really necessary. Those manipulation tactics, I just don't think they're the best way to go about it. I often think actually they lead to a lot of buyer's remorse. If someone feels like they haven't won in a deal, then they can almost sometimes that's why sometimes people have negotiations. They agree on a deal, they send the contract, then if they hear anything again, they get ghosted. Or maybe the person signs the contract and then cancels, right? Then you've celebrated something, they've churned and they've decided not to move forward. So I think it's in the best interest of everyone to have a very, very integral human conversation that doesn't involve any of these rigmaroles and tricks and mind games to make someone move forward. Sometimes it's just a case of two people having a chat like the one we're having right now and figuring out a solution that works for everyone. So I'll tell you what, I'll give you an example.
Sure.
I was working with a customer a little while ago, and he was a good guy. He's interesting. He's funny. He was an Irish dude, actually. And he came to the thing. He said, okay, well, what can you do for me? I was like, okay, well, first of all, mate, where's this come from? Because we've talked about price like 8 times over the last couple of weeks. You know,
Yeah.
you didn't have any problems when I mentioned it last time. He goes, yeah, but you know, I'm a salesperson. You're a salesperson. I know there's probably something you can do for me. And I was like, all right, okay, let's rewind again. What's the reason that you want to do something? He was like, oh, well, yada, yada. And I kind of got to the bottom that he just kind of wanted to feel like he was getting a deal.
Yep.
I was like, okay, so you want to feel like you're getting a deal. You think I've got some flex here. I can flex things, but I can't do them for no reason. I'm going to get run up and down the room by my sales manager for just giving away stuff for no reason. It's just not what I do. So look, these are some things I care about. What can you offer me? Because I don't want to give anything away without getting sort of some value in return. At that point, I'm just having like a very one-to-one conversation. I think a lot of sellers come in at the subservient, I need this deal and therefore I need to please this person. And reality is like there are customers on your customer list who pay full price, who didn't ask to negotiate, who went straight for your solution, said, yeah, let's go ahead, let's do it. Bang, 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 sign the contract, let's go. It's not even fair to them to start giving people stuff just because they asked for it. That's a bad business practice. Heck, in some cases, this happens in the world of work. One employee negotiated for their job and the other person didn't.
Yep.
And therefore one person got a bigger salary, but they're doing the same job. And then they go out for beers and they find out they're being paid different amounts. How does the person who's being paid less feel about that? Not great. Mm-hmm. So in the same way, I want to make sure that if my customers ever did start talking to each other, that one of them's not like, I'm only paying $40 a month for that thing and you're paying $100. That's not a good thing to have out there in the world. So I want to get something in return. So if one of the customers does go, oh, why are they paying less than us? Well, actually, he agreed to a 2-year contract with us. Or, hey, that he actually introduced me to 3 other people just like him who are now in my pipe, who one of them will probably close. So it's an extra deal for us, right? They gave me something and therefore they didn't get the same deal as you, right? It's not me just giving away to try and get the deal done. But that can only happen if there's already respect and mutual respect built, and you've got to come at it like an equal, not subservient, because otherwise you'll be walked all over. But you've also got to understand why they want the thing, right? That's why, like, the first question anytime someone asks to negotiate me is like, okay, let's straight up. I've mentioned pricing before. Why is this coming up now? What's the story? Because it could be the situation where, like, well, we're looking at another vendor, and whoever gives us the best price wins. Okay, interesting. Not sure I want to be part of that for one, because
sure,
I'm going to go get some dirty discount from my manager. We're going to make no money on this deal, and then you're going to turn around and tell me that actually you prefer the other vendor and they matched our price and we lost. I'm not doing that unless I know that really what solution do you want. If the price wasn't a thing, what would be happening here? And a lot of people kind of think, oh, he's trying to trick me into something here. I'm like, no. Seriously, I just want to make sure you've told me these are your goals. I want to understand which one of these solutions you think is going to help you meet there. And sometimes there are no differences, and the only difference is the sales rep. And they might even tell you that, like, oh, well, I probably like you more.
I like that guy. I like you more, right? Yeah.
I'm like, okay, why is that? And then I kind of uncover the reason they feel that way. And then there actually is value to that. And it's like, oh, well, I like you more because you have better conversations. I'm like, okay. Do you feel like maybe this other person that you don't like as much, are they being dishonest with you? Like, are you sure that product can even deliver on the capabilities? And then you're creating a gap that you can then say, okay, well, there is obviously a difference of value here, even if it is just you believe me more than the other rep, right? So that's definitely part of it as well. I just want to have a one-to-one conversation and not come in at like, I really need this deal, so I'll do whatever I need to do to get this thing closed, because in that situation, you are going to end up coming away worse off from these very tense scenarios.
Well, I loved, Will, how you talked about it from the 3,000-foot view, talking about not only the here and now, like getting this deal done, the commission breath, as you called it, but also thinking about, right, what is going to happen if a couple of my customers talk, like having that price integrity. And the other point that you hit on that I really liked, which is talking about the gives for the gets, right? We don't ever have a give without a get. But within that, and I loved you hit another point that was amazing, you can come over here and do my job, but you hit another point that's amazing, which is talking about value to things, right? And that's important to uncover in a negotiation, which is how much does the other party value something that I might have? Because maybe they have high value on something that I have that I don't care that much. And so if they're asking me for something that I have that's high value to them, that's a pretty good trade, right? So I loved how you mentioned that, talking about the value of things and what I could get for a give.
Yeah, I think that's The give get has always been something I've done. Now, I don't know if you've had him on. If you haven't, get him on. A guy called Todd Capone takes it a step further. He actually outlines everything he can give and everything he can get, and the very first call. I read his book recently called The Transparency Sale, so I want to make sure I give him credit for it. He talks about like laying out, hey, this is the price. If you want a different price, these are the things I would want in return on like from step one of the sales process. And that way, when it comes to the end, he said, okay, you know what I want in return. You want a lower price? Which of those can you give me? And then he starts doing the trades that way. I think trades are always a good move because it shows pricing integrity and faith in it. And to your point again, the value in what you're selling is obviously there for you at this point. If they don't need what you're selling, then they probably shouldn't have got this stage in your sales process, really. They should have been disqualified at step one if they don't have a real pain or problem that's going to be solved by your product. So then again, it's like uncovering that, peeling that back. That's the value for them. And if there isn't any value there, then maybe it's not even in their best interest to buy from you. And you can tell them that. I mean, right. Like, I'd be like, hey, I wish we had figured this out earlier, but it doesn't sound like you actually need this. Like if they're telling me like, oh, there's no value, or like, I don't see the value at that point. I'm like, I wish we had had this conversation earlier because maybe it is the case you don't need this. And then I'm happy to walk away from a deal because I don't want someone to buy something or agree to buy something that they don't actually need and going to regret and churn or not sign the contract after we've agreed on a price, right? Because that's even worse. That's wasting my time because now I'm going to be chasing them. They're going to be ghosting me because they've realized, hang on, I don't really need to spend all this money on this thing. I would rather that happen during the first call. But if it gets to this point, you can still pull that one out of the bag and be like, because frankly, I don't want to be the sales rep who sells people things they don't need, because that is when you start to fulfill the stereotype that people have as about salespeople, which is that they would do anything to get the deal done and they'll sell ice to an Eskimo. But frankly, I don't want to sell ice to an Eskimo. And I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that. Are you allowed to say that? Sell ice to a Canadian.
You can say that you what?
You can sell ice to a Canadian. I don't want to sell ice to a Canadian unless their refrigerator is broken, the outside is dirty, their partner's mad at them because the ice tray is always empty. And that's causing problems in the relationship. Then I might sell it to them, right? But if there's no problem with their ice, I ain't going to try and sell it to them because it's a fool's game because we can get really far in and they're going to go, we don't need this. We've got other priorities. Well, of course you do. You're in Canada in January. You got plenty of ice, all right? I could have told you that from square one, right? So that's why it's really important to do the work up front to then have a better success at the end here when you're negotiating a deal, getting that thing closed.
Well, you're really touching on 2 points because that's got a dual benefit. It's got benefit number one of you get to operate with integrity, right? Which is very important, not only to the short term, but the long-term relationship. And two is that you're actually even, like you pointed out, Will, saving yourself logistical headaches and nightmares down the road. So not selling something to somebody who doesn't need it, yes, it does accomplish the goal of integrity, but it also frees you up later on to deal with the buyer's remorse and all the logistics and headaches that come with reversing the contract, getting ghosted, etc.
If it even gets to that stage, most of these deals will ghost you long before you get to negotiating with them. Because I've seen it. I did a little post-mortem on some of my deals back in the day. And I saw I was spending like twice as long chasing customers who weren't buying as I was chasing customers who did end up buying. It was like literally half the deal cycle. If a customer ended up buying, on average, the time they spent evaluating was cut in half. So I was realizing I'm wasting so much time chasing all these people when in reality, I probably could have figured out, do they need this thing? It's like question number one. And if you do that up front, then you know everyone who gets to that point in your process, negotiation, does need your thing, which can then help you arrive with confidence, right? I think a lot of salespeople will get in the trap when they get low, they start letting things that shouldn't be in their pipeline into their pipeline. And then they're working on these deals that are never going to close and they're hammering them instead of actually just getting rid of them and going finding some new ones, picking up the phone, sending some emails, doing whatever they need to do to refill their pipe so they actually have some fresh deals that have a standard chance. But because they're so focused on not failing, they're almost harming themselves because they're trying to sell to people who just will never, ever, ever end up buying.
Yeah, so the takeaway from that is like, if you are willing to be pursuing new opportunities, you're better off having a low amount in your pipe versus a low amount of possible things in your pipeline versus a high amount of just anything that comes in, because the ones that we're never going to buy, they're just going to take up all your time anyway. So really being respectful of that to make sure that when you get to the part where you're negotiating if it makes it that far, you're negotiating with people who really want to be there in the first place.
Bingo. That's it.
I agree with that 100%. The I think some of the reasons why, people might get to a stage of negotiation and not really I have identified, is this somebody who needs what I have, is a lot of times ego can be involved too, Will. And I want to hear your thoughts on ego in that sales and negotiation process. I mean, we see it all the time in salespeople. By the way, I'm a former police officer. And so in law enforcement, we know ego, right? We see ego. And do you see that as helpful more often than not, or harmful more often than not, both in the sales and negotiation?
Harmful in sales and negotiation, I would say. I think there's a difference between a little bit of self-confidence in both yourself and your solution and actually having an ego. One of those is healthy. The other one is not. Whenever I've seen my ego pop into my sales life, bad things have happened.
Yeah.
Like my inability to be wrong. But, that's caused me to actually upset some prospects. I remember one time I made a cold call to someone, and I opened up the cold call and I was kind of like dialing and I was kind of like zoned out a little bit. And then it picked up. I wasn't expecting it. So I completely blundered my opener. It was meant to be like, hey, I normally do like a little cheeky little thing, like tell them like why I'm calling and like why I think they might be interested, just like a very quick little thing. But in this case, I was like, oh, hey, Jeff, how are you? And I hate getting cold calls where people are like, how are you? Well, I'm like, yeah, I'm great. What do you want? Can you?
Right.
I get what this is. Can we just get to the point? What is it you want? I'll let you know.
Yeah.
And I'm a salesperson. I'll take every cold call I get. I just the ones that say, how are you? I'm like, good. You. Great. Now can we actually have a real conversation like adults? Because they were insincere. Anyway, the guy went, yeah, I'm all right. Sorry, who is this? And I said, it's Will Aitken here calling from company. And he said, right, have we spoken before? I said, no, we haven't spoken before. This is a cold call. And then I did my open. I was like, the reason I'm calling is because blank, blank, blank. Thought this might be relevant. And then he was like, why did you pretend that you knew me when I picked up the phone? I was like, sorry, what do you mean? And he said, well, you said, how have you been? Like we've spoken before. Like, how have you been would imply that we've had a conversation before. And I went, okay, let me just think back. And I was like, I don't think I did say, how have you been? I said, how are you? Granted, not the best opener. So, can I give it another shot? And I kind of made a joke there.
Right.
And he was like, no, you tried to deceive me. That's a horrible way to start a buyer relationship. Why don't you leave with something of value? I was like, and he kind of grilled me a little bit. And afterwards I was feeling like, what? So I went back and listened to the call because we were using Gong at the time to record our calls so we can get coaching and listen to them, tweak ourselves and give ourselves feedback. And I listened to it. And sure enough, I did say, how are you? Right. By this point, the fact I had to go back and listen, not just move on to the next prospect, my ego was getting involved. Not only did I listen to the recording, I then went and found the guy in LinkedIn and sent him the freaking recording to prove him wrong. At that point, this guy ain't going to be turning into a customer. In fact, I could have told you from the way he treated me on the phone, he was never going to be in my pipeline. Me and him were not going to get along, and he was probably never going to be a paying customer. But because I got my ego involved, I had to be right. I had to win. And you know what happened? I sent him a recording. He said, I live in the state of California. It's illegal to record calls here without telling me. So I'm going to sue you. And I'm going to make sure that you're fired for this.
Yeah.
And then I spent 2 weeks restlessly awake, wondering when I was going to get let go or escalate things or hear from my manager that this guy had called us and hit us up and all that stuff. It never did happen. But that's a classic case of where I let my ego get involved when really good part about sales is sometimes, okay, that one didn't work out. Who's next? And all right, moving forward, what can I learn from that? Okay, probably pay attention when you're making calls because someone's going to pick up the phone. That's the whole point of making cold calls. That was my biggest takeaway. And then the second takeaway was like, even when you're right, it's better to be right and know you're right and just move on than actually try and prove you're right. And that was all my ego doing that. Same thing happens in negotiation all the time. When you need to win, not because you're losing sight of what the customer wants as well. I think a lot of sellers are really good at like understanding what their customers need, putting that first. But when you think about you, that's a real dangerous place to be.
On that topic, there's just this sense of like, when you talk about ego and how when ego gets introduced, bad things happen, like when we talked about in the beginning, deception, right? There just seems to be this trend in sales that, and in negotiations, where you're building the relationship where honesty and integrity and relatability, authenticity, all these things seem to be coming out as the winners more often now than in the past, call it 10 years. Two questions. Do you agree with that? Do you feel that in your bones, that like the integrity and the honesty is starting to be appreciated more? And if so, if you agree with me or disagree, why do you think that's happening? Do you think it's a result of COVID? All as we head into the technology phase, what are your thoughts there?
I think for a very, very long time, salespeople got a bad reputation of being liars, deceivers, do whatever they need to do to get the deal done. I think there's a word for that, but I forget it. Do whatever needs to be done to get to the goal, including lying and deceiving and tricking people. And in a way, the reputation's got up to the profession. And technology has meant that you cannot physically do that anymore. There is so much information available online that if you were trying to lie about a product or its capabilities, then you probably get found out. Or there's access to other buyers of a product that you could ask about these things, or previous users, or reviews, whatever there is. There's so much more information now that actually the buyer is the one with a lot of power in these sales environments. They have all the knowledge they need almost to make a decision without you. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to come to that with the wrong attitude and the wrong approach, then that's going to, I think, in a way, erode trust. So I've always found there's success in building trust with people. Buyers are naturally mistrusting of salespeople because of the reputation of salespeople. They'll do whatever they want. They're in it for themselves. They're just self-serving and want the commission check. So when you can subvert that expectation, you actually build immense trust because you're doing the opposite of what they expect a salesperson to do. And part of that is they expect a salesperson to lie. So when you're honest, that's great. They expect a salesperson to talk all about themselves and pitch and pitch. So when you ask questions and show interest and actively listen to what someone's saying and understand them, they're like, whoa, hang on a second. And when you, they expect you to be talking all about yourself. But when you focus entirely on them, again, you're just subverting all these expectations of what they think a salesperson is, breaking that down and building massive amounts of trust in the process. And because buyers have the power in a lot of cases these days, whether it be economic climate or access to information, that can be your superpower. From the very get-go, from the prospecting end of the spectrum right through to actually negotiating something with someone, because you've built that massive amount of trust because you've done all the things that they didn't expect you to do. They expect salespeople to be what's the word? Hide the truth, but
deceptive, flashy.
Yeah, missing out important piece of information. But actually, when you actually come forth with things like your flaws or reasons why people don't buy from you, or your pricing. A lot of sellers these days hide pricing for quite some time, and it frustrates the heck out of a buyer who knows they're interested but just wants to know the damn price. So when you can be forthcoming with all that information, that's where you can start to build that trust. So I do believe that's a trend that's come about from years and years of bad reputation of the sales profession, but also the massive amounts of information that buyers now have access to. You pretty much have to do those things if you want to succeed or do sales at a really high level. I don't think you'll find many top performers these days who are like, yeah, lie, deny. They didn't ask, so I didn't tell them, right? A lot of that mentality is definitely, it's a loser's game these days, I think.
Well, it makes sense from a psychological perspective too, because if you think about the buyer coming in with a high level of emotion, that emotion just happens to be distrust. Mm-hmm. If you show them some of the things that you've talked about, Will, you're listening to what they say, you make it about them, they have a feeling that you genuinely have their best interest at heart. What's interesting is I've seen that you even bypass neutrality. So if you're down here and all of a sudden you don't go here, you go way up here. So it's like they come from distrust way past level to really, really, really trusting you. Have you found that too?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Heck, I think about a time I didn't close the sale. In fact, I disqualified them on the first call. This guy was like, me and him were like buddies by the end of the call. So he was like, I need this, this, and this. And I was like, okay, just help me understand why you need those things. And I was like, I'll be straight with you. I don't think this is the best solution for you. And he was like, whoa, why not? And I was like, he was like, well, why, what, hang on, the salesperson's not trying to close me right now? What do you mean? I don't understand. Like, it doesn't feel right. And I was like, well, I just think that based on the fact you told me this and this, I think you're probably looking at the wrong category of products entirely. And I'd actually recommend looking over there. And he was like, what am I missing here? Like it. And then he was like, so what types of people do need your products? And then I gave him like folks who generally are facing this challenge, and this challenge, or any of those problems for you. And he goes, no, not really. My problems are this, this, and this. And I was like, yeah, I think you should go and look at this. But what that actually led to was a referral in the end. So I still feel like I won. I didn't waste weeks chasing this deal, trying to make a square peg fit in a round hole. I built trust and I got something out of it. And now he still likes all my LinkedIn posts, which is nice.
But then again, who wouldn't like your LinkedIn posts?
Who do not like my LinkedIn posts and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather that be out in the ethos, because personal brands do last as well. That's something to keep in mind. Like, if you're not selling with integrity, then you can build a bad reputation as a seller, especially if you're someone who's out there. Like, there are plenty of sales trainers who I know have done some pretty shocking things that I've heard from other people. And I like to try and judge people based on what I experience, because rumors fly around, right? But there are definitely some people out there who have lost trust from the wider community because they've been doing some of those things.
Again, I go back to what I said initially, which is it's a benefit in both ways. You get to have integrity and have more success. Imagine that, right? Imagine that. Well, before we wrap up here and I hear a bit more about any current projects that you want to chat about, I want to ask you real quick this question. Now, we will preface it by saying that the answers that we both might have right now in this moment could change in 10 minutes. It's about AI.
Okay.
So obviously nobody has the answer to AI or anything. It's moment to moment. But in your view right now, both from a negotiation and a sales perspective, are you feeling like AI is going to be adding any value in the short term? Or do you think it's more of like, it's just going to cause a lot of confusion right now and we'll see the value down the road? What are your overall, just any kind of thoughts you want to share about AI?
I have a lot of thoughts, so I've got to choose which one I want to share.
Sure.
I work for an AI company right now, by the way. So I work for a company called Lava.
And I want to hear about that after. Yep.
Yeah. So
that's why I saved that question till the end. So go ahead.
Well, but I do believe that, to put it as one of my colleagues puts it, Jen Allen, Knuth, she's got a hyphen now. She got married. That salespeople, people in general, have a tendency to try and hit the easy button on a lot of things, and I think AI can be an easy button. And what I'm seeing is very quickly that can catch up to you. So when AI first started coming out, people started writing blogs to help their SEO on their website. People started writing cold emails to like send out 1 million cold emails in a day and up the amount they're doing, right? But that can then, if you're doing those things, you're undercutting your own value of what you bring to a role in a way. Like if you think an AI can write a better email than you can, then what does that say about your belief in your ability to write an email? I think there's some really cool applications for AI. I use it pretty much every single day.
Yep.
I use it to rewrite my YouTube video titles to be slightly more punchy or more clickbaity, or I use it to give me like 10 different options and I pick the best one. I use it sometimes to, when I have an idea and I want to make it like a pun or a joke, or I'm like, can you think of like 10 different puns for this? And then I can use that, right? Or like I can get it to look at one of my customers' annual reports and say, okay, can you give me a highlight of what this is? And then tell me what in this annual report would suggest that they might need a tool like this. It can do really smart things like that. We can save you a bunch of time. But the moment we start using it to replace our actual engagements with the prospect directly, I'm sorry, the dog's going a bit bonkers right now.
Oh, no.
I think dogs. That is where we really could be in danger as salespeople. Once we start trying to replace the direct communication, whether that be an email, LinkedIn message, chat, with our buyers, I think we're actually undermining the value that we bring to these roles. I think that's where I'd be worried about people hitting the easy button. As I told you, my colleague puts it.
Yeah, devaluing the roles too. But I think people right now are on such high alert for anything that appears to be AI related, but being represented as their own creativity. I think you're right. I think that goes also towards that trust and relationship.
Imagine this: you get an email from someone, and they've pretended they've written it by using AI, but you notice, because it does have clues. I can tell when I get any AI email now. I know what it is. It's got this like weird icky tone. It uses like these strange adjectives that humans don't. It doesn't use human writing patterns. I don't find yet. Maybe that will change, right? Like you said, in 10 minutes, maybe they figure that out. But I just did a little podcast recording earlier today with one of my colleagues, Jen, again. And we got shown 10 emails, and I think 6 of them were written by humans and 4 of them written by AI. We knew which ones were written by AI every single time. Even though the person who got those AI emails asked it to like rewrite them, make it sound less robotic and all that, we could still tell. And buyers can too. So if you're going to use that in your sales process and use it as a way to pretend you're doing the work and they figure that out, look at that trust that we just eroded. The big theme of this entire conversation has been trust, and you're almost tricking your buyers because it's easier to use AI in that way. But that is going to make people feel very icky, and that's not a good way to make your buyers feel if you're trying to build trust.
It goes right back to the heart of what you said, Will, which is authenticity, right? I mean, that's how you build the trust in these relationships, is being authentic. And people need to feel like you really have their best interest at heart, not that you're trying to get one over on them. So you and I are in complete alignment on that. So to wrap us up here, let's talk about, so we talked about it in the beginning, working on a book. You explained a bit about that. What else does Will Aitken have going on in your world?
I'm just cranking on content right now. So most of my day job is working at that company, Lavender. I run all that sales enablement resources, that type of thing. A lot of that ends up on social media. So I love my YouTube channel, their YouTube channel. I call it mine, but it's because I get attached.
You're on it every day.
But I'm trying to work on more personal projects, like I mentioned in the book. Trying to start merch stores and stuff like that. I want to I love wearing Hawaiian shirts. I want to have ones that are like made for salespeople. So there's more stuff like that coming out that's going to be more Will Aitken themed rather than Lavender themed. But I love the work I'm doing with Lavender. So if there's one thing I would ask people to check out, that YouTube channel, go watch some of that stuff there. It's good stuff.
Okay. So just to be clear, they would find it through Googling you on YouTube. This is your own project, a separate and aside from Lavender. Is that correct?
This is Lavender's YouTube channel. It's just everything.
Okay, got it.
Everything that goes on there is from me. So just type in Lavender email on YouTube and you'll find a bunch of very dope videos. There's only so much you can say about email, so I have to get very creative in the ways I talk about it.
Well, I can tell everybody again, if you haven't seen his videos, there's a lot of good content out there from people, but the truth be told, Will has some of the more entertaining videos that I have seen, and that's the truth. So I really appreciate them myself, and I started looking them a long time ago, sir.
Thanks so much, Matt. I really appreciate that.
So unless there's anything else, we will wrap up there. Everybody, Will Aitken, thank you so much for being on, sir. We generally appreciate it.
Thank you.